Aloha and welcome to this experience in which we're going to enhance the BowFolios application. I think this will be really helpful to you both in helping you dig into the BowFolios code and start to understand it, and also giving you a sense for how an incremental enhancement to a web application actually happens in practice. So I'm quite excited about you trying this out. And we're just going to go through the instructions as they're set up. First thing we have to do is go to the BowFolios GitHub repo. This first section is just getting a copy of the application that we can actually work on. And there's a few different ways we can do this, but we're going to just fork it, which is kind of the canonical way. So we can go to the BowFolios GitHub repo, which I've already retrieved here, and we'll click on the fork button. And I have a lot of organizations that I'm associated with, but I'm going to fork it, as you should, into your local account. So now there'll be a copy of the repo inside my personal account, and I can work on this, and now it's completely detached or independent from the BowFolios repo itself. So I'm going to open this in desktop the standard way. It's going to be inside my own personal directory on my local workspace. So now I've forked from one account in GitHub to another account in GitHub. Now I'm doing a clone to make a copy of my fork on GitHub on my local laptop. Okay, and that's frustrating. Let me just this is kind of left over from when I was playing around with this. So let me just get rid of that, and then I can do, because that was a little IntelliJ hiccup. Okay, so now I have a copy of BowFolios on my laptop, and let's hide this and return to the instructions. So I've forked it. I've got it in my own personal thing, and then I want to follow the BowFolios installation instructions for doing the installation. So I've installed Meteor. So this is in BowFolios under the installation section. I've installed Meteor, so I've downloaded it, and then I have to do a Meteor npm install and Meteor npm run start. So let me cd into GitHub Philip M. Johnson BowFolios app, and then I want to do a Meteor npm install. And basically what this is doing is essentially just copying files from a global Meteor cache that Meteor sets up into this particular project directory. So this should go, kind of relatively fast, unless, something's happened and there needs to be some updates and so forth. But generally, this goes pretty quick. And the next thing we'll do is a Meteor npm run start. Okay, so now it's all, everything's good. Meteor npm run start. And of course, this is in your packet. This runs a script in your package.json file called start. And the contents of that script is basically just this line right here. We do a no release check so that we don't get bogged down when we're starting an application with Meteor, all of a sudden deciding, hey, there's a new release out there, I'm going to go download it right now. And then more importantly, we have a configuration file which we need to pass in to establish certain parameters for the application. And this is a very standard kind of thing you should get used to doing, is thinking about an application having a settings file. Not only that it should have a settings file, but it might have one settings file for development and one settings file for production. And when we get to the deployment chapter, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so the app is starting, and so now we can see it's running at localhost 3000. we get this message about bcrypt. My strong recommendation is just ignore it. Okay. If you're on a Mac, you can do a meteor npm install --save bcrypt, get rid of it. Though, if you're working on a team with folks on a Windows platform, then you've just created some pain for them. Okay, so I really recommend you don't fix this when you're working in a team with Windows people at the moment. So anyway, let's make a copy of this and go to our browser. We can read a Meteor localhost 3000. Now we're running BowFolios locally. I can click login, and because I've logged in before, it has saved a cookie, which means I get logged in through the UHCast server automatically. Hopefully that's not confusing to you. You'll have to type in your login credentials, but they should work, and then you should get this page, and we can see, we get this page. And so BowFolio works for us now, our local thing, just like it does for regular folks. So that's really good. Next thing is, and then I noticed if the login fails, then it's probably because the testcast server doesn't have your current credentials. Please post a request to the Slack workspace, and then I can request that ITS updated, and then everything will be fine. Okay, so let's now create an IntelliJ project. So if I go to IntelliJ, and I can say create new project, static web, and then let's look for the one I want, which is in GitHub, Philip M. Johnson, BowFolios, and I say finish, and let's update dependencies. I don't think we want to update the dependencies. I haven't seen that message before, but just click it closed. I don't think that should matter. Okay, so now we have BowFolios, and one of the things we need to do to make BowFolios run correctly, if we go to Preferences, Languages and Frameworks, JavaScript, Code Quality Tools, ESLint, you're going to see that the ESLint package is not correct. And to understand why that's important, if I go to some code, like we're going to need to be here in a couple seconds. So if I go here, you can get this error. Failed to load plugin Meteor, cannot find module ESLint plugin Meteor. Okay. The reason is because this needs to be set to your local node modules ESLint inside this project, because that's where the module ESLint plugin Meteor can be found. So to fix this, all we have to do is change this path so that we go to GitHub, Philip M. Johnson, BowFolios, app, node modules, and then ESLint. So we say open, and then we say OK, and then in the best of all possible worlds, the message goes away, and all of a sudden this thing satisfies ESLint. Okay? Alright, so having done that, let's see, so we've created the IntelliJ project, we've set up ESLint, that's working. Sometimes the indexing takes a while, I wouldn't worry about it, this time it didn't. Okay, so now let's go on to actually implementing the enhancement. And so first, I want you to notice that we're adding a location field. That's the goal, okay? And so if we look at this, the profile page, you see that now there's a location field after the title and before the picture. And then, so that's, in the form that accepts the data. And then when we display things, you can see that for two of our users, Lee Altenberg and Kyungyim Beck, there is a location field. It's right there, Honolulu, Hawaii, but other users don't have it. So it's an optional field. Okay, so here's what we actually have to do to add a field to the system. And there's essentially three parts to it. The first thing we have to do is update the database so that it can store and retrieve location fields. Second thing is we have to update the profile page so that the form where we fill out user data, we can supply location data there and it can be retrieved. And then finally, when we display the cards associated with users, we see the location data being presented. And after we've done those three things, we're going to commit the code. Okay, so let's start off and do those three steps. The first thing we need to do is add an optional location field to profile collection. And we're going to start by working on the profile collection.js file, which is the one that we're looking at here, so it's quite convenient. Okay. The first thing you notice is that the constructor creates, extends base collection. So it can be interesting for you to look at this base collection class to understand how this thing works in general, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to assume that you've been looking at it and looking at my other screencasts. And what we're going to do is we can really put it anywhere. I'm going to actually duplicate that title line because that's almost exactly what we want. And so now we've just defined in our schema the idea that there can be a field called location and its type is string and it's optional, so it doesn't have to be supplied. That's good for the constructor. Let's go to this definition thing. Let's now update the comment to say location Honolulu, Hawaii. Okay. And then if we look at this define method, we can see that it takes an object that has all the fields of interest. And so let's add the idea that it can accept in that object that the define field is passed, one of the fields can be called location. And if it's not given a value, then it will have the default value of an empty string. Okay, and we see ESLint says location is defined but never used. Sure, because we're going to use it. Second thing we need to do is we like to check the structure of things, so we use this check pattern. Let's add location string to that. And then finally, we'll just add location as a value that should be checked against this check pattern. So this is just kind of verifying that the fields have the right type of value. If they don't, then they will be an error will be flagged. Okay, and then finally, so if everything's all good, we're going to actually insert our new data into the collection. So we add the location field to that, and then there's this dump method which is used if we want to create a JSON file that contains the contents of the database, and we should just update that as well to add this new field. Again, a lot of this is just kind of pattern matching. You can kind of see for this simple kind of extension, you can just look at the context and figure out how to do it. More complicated things are more complicated to do, but that's in this case it's pretty simple. Okay, so we've updated profile collection.js, and now we've got to update profile collection test.js to test this. So again, I'll kind of just assume location is a lot like a title, and I'll add in Honolulu, Hawaii as a location, and then our define object, and we're going to go over our line limitations here, so I have to make a new line. Is going to include that, and then so we then define a new profile instance by passing in this object that contains a location field, and then we can test after we retrieve it that in fact there is a location field and it's equal to what we expect it to be. So that's how we update our test, and then finally we're going to update our initial data file so that the first couple of entries have some location data. So that means going into private database initial collection data.json, and if we move down here we can see our first couple of folks are Lee Altenberg and Kyungyim Baek. So I'm going to add location, and say, I don't know where they live, but we'll just pretend they both live in Honolulu. It's fine. Okay, so and then there's other folks, Ado and Kim and so forth, who don't have location data, so that's kind of good is to check that this is truly a optional field. Sometimes it exists, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so now we have to check to make sure these changes work, so we're going to go and run an meteor npm run lint. Okay, so now we're going to run, we're actually going to get out of the running application. Meteor npm run lint, that checks to make sure by running from the command line, it'll look through all our code, so we don't have to kind of search around in IntelliJ to see if there's any errors, and we didn't have any errors. That's good. And then what's next? Meteor npm run test watch. So this is in BowFolios how we run tests, and it brings this up this local test server that runs on a different port called 3100, and it's kind of cool because it will rerun tests as you incrementally develop code. There's a few different ways that you can do testing in Meteor, and I'm showing you one way in this system. And actually, in BowFolios, we're only doing testing of the data model. So so there isn't any user interface tests in BowFolios. It's something that potentially I'll add in the future. Okay, so started MongoDB. We get our bcrypt error as we always do, and then we're running on 3100, which is different from 3000, which is the port that the regular application runs on. And the nice thing about that is it means you can potentially run both the application and the test at the same time. Okay, so both of our tests pass. This is quite nice. And if I go back here, okay, run test watch. I went to localhost 3100, and now I have to reset the database and then restart the system. I reset the database because remember I edited that initial database contents thing, and I want to get that to actually be loaded. It only gets loaded when there's nothing in the database. So first I clear out the database, then I do meteor npm run start to see it. So if I go back to my terminal, I'll control C out of this, and then if you know about Unix a little bit, you know that you can run more than one command on the same line by putting a semicolon between them. So this is a way that you don't have to just kind of wait for meteor reset to finish and then type the meteor npm run start. You can just type one line and go off and get coffee or something. So you can see this line indicates that the project was reset. Now we're restarting things up with our settings file, and we wait a few seconds. And we wait a few more seconds. But not an excessive number of seconds. We notice that my neighbor is weed whacking. Okay, so we're just about there. All right, here we go. So now we go to localhost 3000, and you can also see that we're restoring the database. Okay, so that's nice. So we've loaded it in, and if we go back to our browser here, you can see it gets displayed. You can do login. Again, I go through that because I've got a cookie set. Bug or feature, you be the judge, I don't know. But what you will notice is actually nothing's changed in our user interface. Right, we've still got the same old stuff that I had to refresh so that the little icon showed up correctly. That only seems to happen when you do a restart in the previous page the page was displayed from a previous run of the system. Okay, so if we go back here, we can see that we've successfully updated the database. Reset works, npm run start works. Now what we want to do is edit the profile page, which is this page right here, so that there's a location field and that information is stored in the database. So the way we're going to do that is go into the Imports UI Pages User Profile Page section and update the HTML to display a location text field below the title, and then update the corresponding JavaScript to get that value and pass it along. Okay? So let's see how that works. We have to go into UI, Components, Directory. No, I'm sorry, I'm in the totally wrong place. UI Pages, User, Profile Page.html. So here's where we've got the HTML, and we want to make a copy of that title, form control, and this will be for location. And again, you know, you may be tempted to just not understand, but just, you know, kind of type things that look similar. But I encourage you to look at the videos and look at this code so that you kind of have an understanding of you know, why these things are structured the way they are. And because of the fact that we've got these these component templates and so forth, there's relatively little coding required here. But you do need to understand, unless in case you kind of go out of the narrow confines of the code that's written here. So in this page, it's really the submit event where we now are extracting the data from the form, and just like we get a title, I'm using a propeller D to duplicate the line. We want to get the location, and then you can see ESLint is saying, hey, you defined this but never used it. Totally right. So what we want to do is we want to add location to the profile data that's going to be updated, and then everything should just work fine. So if I now I'm going to save that out, and what you'll notice here is that we're now restarting the system with these changes, which is good. And if I go here, now I'm going to display the profile page, and hopefully if I refresh, I didn't even have to, the system refreshed for me. The location field is now present. And so let's just create a profile for me and see if the location data is there. So having used myself as the prompts here for some of it, professor, location, Kailua, Hawaii. I don't have a picture. Sure, I'm interested in software engineering. And yeah, what the heck, I'll do Philip M. Johnson as my GitHub profile. I'm a professor. Okay, so if I do submit, okay, what you can see is my profile data was successfully updated, and a kind of a quick way to verify that is to just simply refresh this page. When you refresh the page, it forces Meteor to go retrieve the data from the database again. And so since you know, my location field showed up when I refreshed, I know now that data was actually successfully stored in the database and then provided back to me. Okay, so we've done that. We've updated the profile page, but again, you know, this still isn't being displayed, right? If we look at the filter, we can see, okay, here I am, I'm a professor, but there's no location data. So now we need to display it. This turns out to be easy. We go to this directory profile page right here, and we can see if we kind of like look at the profile and go back and forth, we've got this header, the profile first name and last name, we've got the picture, and then we've got the title and this meta field, which has this kind of gray font, and then there's the description and a description field section and so forth. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, there's a lot of different ways, you know, you could choose to add the data, but the way I'm going to add the data is just to add this field location, right, like this, and then well, you can see it refreshes, and now all of a sudden you can see Honolulu, Hawaii for Lee, Honolulu, Hawaii for K, and Kailua, Hawaii for me. Okay, so now the user interface magically, working, providing this location data. There we go. And oh, I should note, that since there's no location data associated with the 8.0, nothing appears, and that's just a nice thing about the way these templates work. It will just return a string or return the empty field if nothing's there. And semantic UI won't provide space for an element that has no data in it. Okie dokie. So that's the display page. All that's left really is to commit the code. So we go to GitHub, and if we go here, we can see these are the pages. We updated profile collection, the test, the directory profile, the profile page, and the initial data. Okay, so we say added location field, commit and sync. There we go, and then if we go to BowFolios, we can see that we just made this commit 13 seconds ago, which has our changes, and if we really wanted to make sure they're there, one way to do is just find a file which we edited, and if we move down here, we can see, okay, great, there's a location field. All right, and there you have it. That's how you make a simple enhancement to BowFolios, soup to nuts. Not a very complicated enhancement, but these general steps are kind of what you need to do almost no matter what you have to change in the system.